Mike from around the world. Mike, how you doing?
Pastor Paul, good evening. Hopefully everybody is doing okay tonight.
I think everybody listening right now is in pretty good shape. I know it's kind of funny. I set up the show tonight. I had a different picture and a different title, and they gave me a picture and title from 3 days ago which says Standeo. So anyway, there's almost 4,000 people here, Mike. Mike, let's talk for a minute. Fireballs exploding over Ohio. Actually, it was seen in 15 states. Asteroids, 9 of them going by the Earth in this 48-hour period. Earthquakes by the hundreds and hundreds of them, all up and down the California coast, from San Francisco all the way to San Diego, especially San Diego. It is shaking like crazy over there. The cracks in the ground in Mexico, and now they're saying they've got big cracks between Tucson and Phoenix. We got a lot to talk about, Mike. And, of course, wars, rumors of wars, everything going on. So, Mike, can you address the fireball situation and really help us understand what's going on in Southern California again?
Well, concerning those objects in space, you think people are paying attention now? It's becoming more and more obvious to a lot of people. It's becoming alarming to a lot of people.
You said it would, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, because they can't, they can't hide the fact that our entire reality is beginning to alter and change, and we're going to have to begin to operate in very different conditions. And so expect increases until we get to the point where we experience meteor storms on a weekly basis. It's gonna begin. It begins this way, but when the smaller fragmentation starts impacting the surface of the Earth, well, then that's going to be very damaging. In fact, that's going to be so damaging that preparations have already been underway this year to avoid that. And to mitigate some of those circumstances. So, I can tell everybody that there are some serious folks who are preparing for some of these, what outsiders would say, nonsensical conversations. They're preparing for it. They're pouring money into it, and they know, if you watch what they're doing carefully, they're preparing for something. They are, in just about every aspect, every category of our existence, there's a lot of money being poured into the preparation of, to protect certain individuals. But, I just pray that those who are Christians actually begin to wake up and move around a little bit, start to take notice, not so they can run to another place, but so that they won't have heart attacks when these things actually do happen. Perhaps because, have you noticed, situations are starting to take Christians, it's starting to overwhelm them. I'm beginning to see that more and more.
Yeah, people are very concerned. Christians are, because a lot of Christians thought by now the rapture would have happened. They didn't think they would be here during plagues like COVID, wildfires burning out of control massively like California, fireballs starting to break loose across the sky, wars, rumors of wars. I mean, really, seriously, most people thought we would have been gone a long time ago, because that's what they were taught for about 100 years. And it's bad because it was really bad teaching. It was not really biblical. If they would have, if the guys preaching back in about 100 years ago and started that, if they would have just stuck to the Bible, then people would be saying, well, this is what the Bible said. We got to prepare. So we got to undo a little bit of that. Tell us more, Mike, about the earthquake in San Diego and what's going on there. Is this? I mean, you when you bring up a 45-degree angle in San Diego. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, because and of course that was spawned from that dream I had, of course, but I've been paying attention ever since, and it's something that more and more every single day there are events that are unfolding, and I'll say it again, in Mexico. Mexico was one of the key points that kickstarted. That was one of the lead points that I saw that led up to this earthquake. And sure enough, the science is backing it up. We have swells happening in the southern hemisphere underneath the earth, magma swells happening in very different places. It's under such pressure. And then you have these new fault lines that are forming, cracks, destabilization events in the crust, and that's leading all the way up to some very dangerous things. Now, not only is California going to be in trouble, but we also have the areas right there in the middle of the Grand Canyon. So that entire province is in trouble, basically. So you're looking at a remake, at a reestablished. People are going to be displaced big time. These small swarms, Pastor, you remember last week we were talking about California, and I said that I described something. I said that small events happened in California, but they passed, and people said, "Oh, it's going to be okay." And then when the smell hit their nose, when it began to stink on the coastlines, which means in a simulation that would mean that sulfur, right, is being released, sulfur and some highly toxic gases are being released from deep within the earth. When that begins to happen, that means it's already broken, and it's only a matter of time. And birds are going to be a good indicator, because they will leave that area due to what they are picking up. Birds have a lot of magnetite in their brains, so any disturbance in the magnetic field or the biomagnetic field, they're gonna go away. So birds are a good indication that something really heavy is coming. If you don't see any birds in the skies in California, like what's happening now, the fires are driving them out now, but if they diminish anywhere, expect a big one. You know, in 1988, 89, I can't quite remember when the last one hit in California, right?
Yeah, it was 89 during the World Series. Yeah,
I was right there. I was right there in Fort Ord, California. I was right there. And the one thing I noticed right before it hit was an absence of birds. It was an absence of birds. There were no birds anywhere. And so they're going to face that same situation again. The problem is, even through deep sea surveys, even through seismic surveys, sound waves that they have injected into the earth to get a sonic representation of what California is sitting on, it's in bad shape. They have brainstormed everything they could, including the use of nuclear weapons to pre-blow some of the weaker points, hoping that possibly they could salvage the state, but they can't do that. You're dealing with enormous forces, and these forces, right, these small earthquakes, if they had 1 million more smaller earthquakes, it is not enough to relieve the pressure of what's building there, because we're still receiving. All of this is tied together. The radiation the earth receives is still causing the swells inside of the earth. It's increasing the temperature. With these swells, it's causing pressure on these rocks, and you have more melting, or something's going to have to blow, where there's simply not enough things blowing.
See the picture right there, Brock. If you put that back on the screen, what they're showing, Mike, is San Diego, and then you can see on this map Tucson to Phoenix, and this area. We got a phone call right after the show last Thursday from people in that area who said there's huge cracks in the ground between Tucson and Phoenix. And so you knew about the ones in Mexico. So this thing is starting to crack. Are you saying that from Phoenix to Tucson all the way to San Diego, we could see massive cracks and breaking off?
Yeah, imagine that entire landmass. Imagine seeing Los Angeles, California, and that area tilted on its side, breaking off, right? Just imagine that. You're dealing with enormous. It's hard to imagine until you begin to look at the scale of the earth, which I'm working on something so people can actually experience the scale of the earth, and then they'll understand, because Los Angeles is nothing more than a cookie. If you were to take a table, right, a big table where everybody eats at, 1 grain of sand would be about 3 to 4 times the size of Los Angeles. So we're not, as far as the earth is concerned, we're not dealing with a big landmass. It's quite tiny, right? So it wouldn't take that much to pluck a piece of sand off the table. That would be the representation of Los Angeles, right? And San Diego and all those places around that area.
Mike.
The scale with the earth.
Mike, from Los Angeles to San Diego, you know how many people live there?
Yes, and that's why it's so disturbing, is because, and you know what they had, listen, something happened for the last 2.5 years, Pastor Paul. There have been so many people put out of a job because they were about to warn people prematurely to get away from that place. Nobody's listening. It's quite concerning to me that nobody's listening. That's just like Japan. right? Nobody's going to listen in Japan and begin to get out of that place. And just how many fires have to come to California before the people realize that these fires, why are these fires showing up in places that give you almost a border of the trouble area that matches computer simulations perfectly? That's unheard of. And when you see things like this, there's no way it's by chance. These are clearly warnings. They happen year after year. They're getting worse year after year. And people just keep going back to the same areas. My question would be this: how many things does the Lord have to allow to happen before people pay attention? Because he's speaking all the time, but who's listening?
You're right, Mike. This is Mike around the world with us tonight, folks. The Bible says, who's got has an ear to hear what the Spirit saith to the churches? And in this case, who's willing to read the Bible and just believe what it says? We've been warned that this is exactly what's going to happen, that the hell is going to be enlarged, and that without measure, that the earth is literally pulling apart. Are the waves of energy, Mike, the 5 waves of energy, are they, I mean, from this binary system, are they pulling on the earth? I saw where Mike Brown, who is a former NASA scientist, now works for Caltech, and he's up there in that observatory in in Hawaii, said that the entire solar system is being pulled on by this planet X or planet number 9, and is causing a 6-degree tilt on our. Can you help us understand this?
He is. I'm glad somebody is saying that. The entire solar system is undergoing quite a tug. It's everything in our solar system, not just the Earth. So this object, right? And ultimately, we're going to have spherical issues. There's a very strange phenomenon that happens when planets are agitated, right? Believe it or not, sound waves are quite powerful. Right. One of the keys to a known type of anti-gravity deals with sound, not anything else but sound. Sound also can disrupt electronic communications. I'm talking about sound waves. Like if you were to beat the right drum, you could stop a mouse from operating on a computer. You could freeze a computer screen, or you could stop somebody's heart. That type of sound, because it's through something called entrainment. Anyway, when planets are always agitating, right, it is known that Jupiter has what's called a life agitation. You wouldn't know that your heart is tied to the agitation or the vibration of Jupiter. What? Very seldom would people ever realize that their kidneys also vibrate at the same frequency as Neptune. Right?
What?
So you have all these.
Are you serious?
Yeah, this has undergone. Listen, they have found out so many things. They just don't tell anybody these things, right? They want people to think complicated, and things are not complicated. It's like our solar system is a mechanism, right? Our solar system is a mechanism, and each component is very important for life here on Earth. And they do interact with us all the time. All those planets have to do with us, and we have to do with the planets. Not in some weird type way. It's just that it's part of creation. God purposed all things, and obviously, since they have found out these facts, because they used to mess up guidance in aircraft. They used to cause astronauts certain health problems. And so by experimentation here on Earth, they succeeded in replicating how these planets agitate. Anyway, when these planets start to align in certain configurations, Pastor Paul, they will do what's called a passive, it almost be like a passive agitation, which means, suppose the Earth being at what's called the Schumann resonance, right?
Yeah, yes, I know that.
It's operating at a certain frequency, right?
Yes.
Through certain configurations, you have an echo of sorts that will take place. The Earth can actually increase its agitation in less than 1 minute by a factor of 1,000. You know what that means? That means we would have a global earthquake, maybe a global 4.5 earthquake about every 10 minutes until the alignment is over. Right, that would shake everything on the planet apart.
How big of an earthquake are you saying?
Only a global earthquake at about a 4.5 would shake everything apart in less than 30 minutes.
Okay.
Let's put it this way: there would be no mountain that would stand with a global agitation that way if it lasted over 10 minutes. And it's just like California. People are going to have a wake-up call to this, because has anybody ever been in an earthquake that lasted 15 minutes?
No.
We're about to find that out. In fact, you're going to notice that some of the earthquakes we're about to have are going to be stretched out in time. It's going to scare people to pieces, because they won't understand how the earthquake is being sustained for such a duration of time, which throws out all these nonsense theories that people come up with. It's a shame, because we don't have to operate by theories. They have been researching these scientific things for a very long time. They know the facts, they just won't share them, right? And a lot of people right now are in the corner of a certain president to continue to pressure folks to release that stuff to the people, so that the people won't waste their time in simulations that just simply don't work.
So whenever you look at these things, Mike, of course, we were just talking before you came on the air how that we're definitely starting to see more of these fireballs. The fireball that went over Ohio and it was seen by 15 states, they said if that thing would have exploded like it did in Russia, it would have done massive damage to the electrical grid system, as well as buildings, houses, would have blown windows out. A lot of people would have been injured or killed. And we're seeing more and more and more. Mike, you know it. These clusters are coming. What do we expect the next 6 months or so? Do you see a major step up in this activity, or about the same?
The interval at which these things are coming in is increasing. It's becoming more and more notable. That will continue to increase until we hit the body of what's coming into our solar system. We are coming into a very dense ring of rocks. We're not going to dodge it. It's going to pass right through us. So as we get closer to that time period where we hit the core of this ring, the center of this ring, we're going to have an increase in the intervals between these things actually penetrating our atmosphere. Due to sheer odds, we're going to have a lot of large objects. I'll say it again. I said this before. In fact, before the one went to Ohio and before the one that nobody knew about a week ago, Pastor Paul, remember we were talking, and I said, they're going to start seeing them go through the atmosphere, skip off and go back out. Yep. They're going to claim they never saw it coming. They're going to claim it. That's a big lie. Right? And the reason why they're lying like this, why they say they cannot tell everybody they see them coming, because people will say, why aren't you doing anything about it? People are skittish. And they're going to say, well, why don't you fire a nuclear weapon at it? Well, if we fired a nuclear weapon, then what we use as a nuclear weapon would be exposed, and that would be a national, that'd be a security problem. So we can't do that either. But what's happening is we're going to be overwhelmed with several events at the same time. And when this takes place, that's when a lot of people will notice some of the newer technology in formation above the skies, and some opposition in formation above the skies. And things in the earth will have changed at that time, unfortunately. But we're quickly approaching these days quicker than what people know. Just like a war. Right? A war is happening right before people's eyes. And it somewhat bothered me last week also, but people are not really taking notice.
Let's talk about that, Mike. Let's talk about that, because let's talk about it, because Azerbaijan attacking Armenia with Turkey. Turkey's flying F-16 fighter jets in there. They're using killer drones. This is, and there's other nations now talking about joining Azerbaijan. Also, we see France now speaking up, saying, wait a minute, Armenia is not guilty here. Let's back off. And then we got 100,000 troops deployed by India to the border of China. I mean, that's a flashpoint. So, Mike, who's behind this Azerbaijan attack on Armenia? I mean, who's really calling the shots, and what's the objective here?
This is a strategic positioning of all the forces of this earth. Armenia is right below what? Georgia. Yeah. Remember that? Yeah. Georgia? Yeah. Don't put your missile defense systems in Georgia. Remember that?
I remember that.
And now you have Turkey, who was very unstable in their relationship with the USA and Western ideologies right now. Now you have Georgia, which is still right there. We need that place. We need that landmass. If we cannot secure Georgia, right? We have no power over the deeper province of that area. In other words, instead of having maneuvers that could defend millions of civilians out there, we would have to somehow either give up lots of territory or take out, 20 or 30 million people. That's not going to happen. We need Georgia. If you notice right now, they're putting up missile defense systems all over the world. Have you noticed?
Yes.
They're at breakneck pace setting them up. Not only is Israel, right, putting the Iron Dome all over the world, but Patriot systems, some of the upgraded versions, they're not. I'm going to say Patriot systems because that's the only thing you can liken them to. But they're being positioned all over the world. Why is this? Because Russia effectively covers the entirety of the Middle East, right up to Jerusalem's neck. So there's nothing that's going to happen near certain areas of Iran without Russia defending them. And we're not just talking about defending. We're talking about both offensive and defensive capabilities. They have air supremacy like we wouldn't believe. So I know a lot of people on the outside, they may not understand the paradigm here. So let me give you this. Why in the world would America need Iron Dome from Israel if we are so advanced in certain areas? Now, it is true. We have great industries here like Lockheed, Skunk Works, and all these people who have developed some very sophisticated machines, right? But not all of them are employed. And there are certain militaries inside of militaries who normally get the good toys, not the average military. It's not going to be your average general. That's not. These guys are almost secondary. And when you start to find out that their underlying organizations is somewhat spooky. It's something you'll hardly ever hear anybody talk about, some of these underlying agencies. And we're not talking about, we're talking about something very different anyway. But this is going on. But what's staging right now is a global war. Now, we have COVID-19, which has disrupted the economic engine of this world. Let's go ahead and face it. Yes. And it's also being used, or can be used, as a noose based upon who has the ability to get supplies where. Right now we have a supply shortage all over the world. Right now we're about to have a lot of civilians upset. Food is one of them, absolutely. Certain textile manufacturings, absolutely. China is pulling the plug on so many programs that for electronics and electronic repair of items and this, that, and the other, we're going to be hurting. If India and China continue to escalate, which they will, at the same time, you have this issue surrounding Georgia and Turkey. That's the real problem, is Georgia and Turkey. That's why you have Armenia doing what they're doing. That's why you have Tabriz soldiers in Ibril and Syria and all these places, all through Aleppo, and then you have this occupational game, both by sea and the air in Sevastopol. You have all these places that are coming alive with activity. We're in big trouble. And now we have the USA, who is really concerned about air defenses, because our defense net, right? Somebody was so, I can't even say it. We have to turn on our defense net. It's only been on, 1, 2, 3, 4 times ever. But that's about to turn on. Our defense net will. This is a time of low air traffic, perfect time to turn on the full air defense net. We have issues, which means combat in space right now that's taking place. That'll be, weapon to weapon. So we have quite a few things that are taking place all at the same time. And then not only that, but countries are tearing themselves apart. Not only is American leadership being challenged by lots of people in their own land, every country is dealing with this rebellion problem that actually began with a ceremony that caught Egypt on fire. You remember what caught Egypt on fire? That guy that set himself on fire.
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
They held a ceremony for 2 weeks, and then that stuff broke out there. Do you know there were all sorts of devilish folks who did this? They held a ceremony for 2 weeks, and right at the end of that ceremony, at the closing, when they had the offering of That was an offering. I'm not going to tell you of what, but that took place. And from that time forward, the Middle East has never been the same. It has never been the same. No. The atmosphere changed and everything else.
What about, Mike, what about the fact that today Erdogan, given a speech, declared Jerusalem is our city? He talked about the fact that Jerusalem was Jerusalem's been captured 29 times in history. But for 400 years, the Ottoman Empire did control Jerusalem, but they had to give it up after World War I. Why in the world is Erdogan saying Jerusalem is our city? And he seems to be everywhere. He's fighting General Haftar in Libya. He's fighting the Kurds in Syria. He's helping Azerbaijan against Armenia. He's helping. What is he doing? What is his objective? What's going on with this guy?
He's not whistling Dixie. We had the death of the Kuwaiti emir, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Who is in incredible ties with Saudi Arabia. So they're one and the same, actually. By root, they're one and the same. And Erdogan understands very dark things. This guy he understands some very deep, dark things. This guy is incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to the spiritual aspect of Islam, just so you know this. He is not only knowledgeable, but he has an air about him that is just very different. It's almost like an anointing passed from Ahmadinejad directly to him. That's what it seems like. That same thing that would follow Ahmadinejad is now all over Erdogan. So don't think that guy's whistling Dixie, because for some reason he has this odd and strange ability, right? He can take an enemy, sit down and talk with his enemy, and cause his enemy to see things his way. So this guy is, by speech, his mouth should have chains on it or something, because this guy is dangerous simply by his speech, but he's not whistling Dixie. He has a negative anointing, is what this guy has. We would say that Christ anoints us in full of his power, which is light. Well, this guy's the opposite, full of darkness. And there is undeniable anointing on this guy. When he says Jerusalem is his, do you not know he's making when anytime Turkey says something out loud like this, it's not important how the outside world views him. It's important how those who are devout to Turkey hear him. He's being heard, and that was the entire point. That was the declaration. Is what he just made a declaration, and there will be follow-throughs. With that declaration, you'll see the activation of just pure resistance. Now, hear me, pure resistance by way of sporadic terrorism, but that's not the deal. Most of the resistance will come by way of the United Nations, political talks, him coming into Israel, speaking, and this guy will. He's just set some things in motion. That was a declaration. That was not just some haphazard statement.
Well, there in the Bible here, Mike, you may have just made reference here, is Daniel chapter 8. Verse 23, the Bible says, "And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to a full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper, and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy he also shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. And he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princesses, but he shall be broken without hand. And the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days." This was what Daniel saw, what some would say an end time beast rising. Any thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, Turkey just happens to be the place where Ahmadinejad used to go. And he would go and visit for about 4 days of prayer. He'd visit the pit.
The pit?
Yeah.
What's the pit?
Well, it's a place that hardly anybody can get near. It's a place that would make the average person sick if they tried to approach it. Only if you look carefully, you'll notice that there were stories about Ahmadinejad, how that a green cloud would encompass him. It was seen at in several places, even in view of Western folks, a green cloud would follow him. He'd make trips to Turkey a lot, and he would visit the pit in this place. And nobody can get near that area. It's one of those places on Earth that are like a supernatural place, but it's just, it'll make you sick if you get near it.
Is it a portal of hell or something? I mean,
well, there are 3 pits in the Middle East, right? One of those pits, it is said in the Islamic world that the Mahdi will rise out of one of them.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, and how he rises is, they said his spirit will actually rise entering into whoever the Mahdi is. They said, whoever it is, they don't know they're the Mahdi. Until a night comes when that spirit settles in them, they will not know. But they will be positioned all their life to be in the right place at the right time to receive whatever comes out of that pit. And then they go start doing what they're doing. The bad part about it is when I was, a long time ago, when I found out about the pit itself, and I knew about that Islamic story from, having to go overseas so much, it kind of sends a small joke through you to know that there is and you can't get near this pit. They can tell you, go ahead and walk up to it. Now, you cannot do it. It's just everything in you freezes, almost like you're stuck in a dream state or something, like a state of hypnosis, I guess you could say. Anyway.
So there's an anointing there, but it's a dark anointing. It's a demonic. It's very demonic, is what you're saying.
And see, this is why Erdogan talks in back channels with Jordan a lot. I don't trust Jordan. I know I say this a lot. I do not trust Jordan. Yeah. I know that ultimately Jordan is the intellectual center for Islam, period. And you can't fight faith with bullets, weapons, money, or anything else. And ultimately, they're going to be loyal. It's just like this issue with India and China. Watch what happens, because you have countries like near Afghanistan. They already said that if anything would happen to cause India to be engaged so strongly, they would instantly side with Islam, turning against all Western individuals in that province. So we have some very unstable things, which is why troop deployments have begun all over the world.
Folks, Mike Around the World's with us right now. We're talking about the final hour. Mike, let's talk about food shortages. I did a video earlier this week interviewing Chance Gibson at simplycleanfoods.net, and he began to talk about it. We seen an article came out. There's definitely global. The United Nations says there's going to be global famines due to the food distribution process was so disrupted due to COVID. And then you throw in the record monsoon rains destroying several nations in the East, especially China, and then the locusts devouring, and then the wars and everything else. So what is your take on it? Let's just talk America first. Is America are we going to have empty shelves? What's going to be short, and is food going to be hard to find? What about meat? What's going on?
Okay, let's do a reality checks. In the beginning of the year, when COVID-19 was first being heard of, we already had a drop in food distribution. We already had that. Right. Because our national granaries are low, and something went wrong with the crops over the last 2.5 years with the weather. As the weather changes, crops are impacted. But when our deals, unfortunately, at the beginning of the year, you had to do a little shakeup with some of these countries that we were dealing with for the sake of our economy, this house, America. By doing that, we didn't import as much as we normally import. So we had to do a little, shuffling around of who does what in America. That's a simple product of who's doing what. other countries try to get a foothold to try and, kind of bully or threaten. And President Trump called their bluff. And so what he did was, a lot of these corporate owners working in unison, tandem with the government, they did a little shuffling so that they could do the remanufacturing and packaging of certain things that could be done within America, which we should have done that a long time ago. I wouldn't want my next door neighbor to hand me my groceries every week when I can do it myself. They're certainly not to eat. They can do that with anything else, not food, because without food you can't do anything else. So that was put back into perspective. As a result of that, certain food items during a repackaging, I'm going to call it, have shifted priority. And so you just simply have a different priority on certain items. We don't import what we used to. We can keep what we normally export, however, to some of these places, right? But it's just not the same product that was coming in. So it's causing a bit of an upset. And in a very true case, now we do have a shortage because manufacturing is disrupted. We have a shortage because travel was disrupted, right?
Right.
But now that was near the beginning of the year. Here's what's happened since the beginning of the year. Farms have taken a ginormous hit.
Yes, they have.
Okay, so and all the dairy cows that once produced, and all your cows for meat and everything else that once produced, horrible things have happened. When the money runs out, when you're a farmer and the money runs out, that's a whole lot to get back on track, and that takes time to grow something, to grow something that's alive. And so when they took a hit, when they were disrupted, so was the food chain, and naturally everything starts to everybody starts doing that power grab. Those companies that made MREs, they were prioritized for the soldiers, of course. Those companies that did your emergency packaging, or let's say contamination packaging, they were prioritized.
Yes.
Because of course, Defense Department, those individuals, they took first seats in having certain food put up for them. And so as a result of that, people already since February, they have seen certain shelves empty, certain products. People have seen alterations in meat products. In fact, some of the meat products that are out there, I don't know, maybe you've noticed that is just a little too different. Some people have noticed thicker meats where they are, and we know what that is. That can't be natural. But
so
it's been a upset.
So are you're saying like you said this a year ago, that look out, watch spam, that spam was going to become one of the most important meat food items that's going to be out there. Everybody's going to have to eat, green eggs and spam. Are you saying that the meat out there, some of it's not real?
Well, have you ever seen those big, bulky, muscle-bound cows?
Yeah.
Have you seen some of the choice animals that they have? They are unreal, bigger than. How would you have a cow that's like a story high or 2 stories high or something like that? So you wouldn't. They have monster chickens and cows and stuff that they're doing stuff with anyway. So yeah, they have to modify certain things in order to produce meats a lot faster, and so that one cow can now produce meats for a lot of people. Unfortunately, they're juicing those things up, and of course people get their whatever. But when they started out with all these spam commercials, and remember I kept talking about the spam, they're doing this on purpose. All of a sudden everybody started saying spam. Eat spam with noodles, eat spam with eggs, eat spam with everything. Just spam. So at that time they stockpiled spam like you wouldn't believe. Do you not know that spam can be kept in those cans for a long time? And by law, they do not have to stamp a date on those cans until they leave certain facilities. So you have that issue. You have more and more manufacturers that have converted their plants that once processed meat. Now they're processing plant life to look like meat. Yeah, our diets have changed because the meat is running out, and they had that issue with a few diseases with cattle that they never told a soul. And in fact, there have been more than a few problems with cattle, and they didn't tell a soul. So we've been losing a lot of our food market. The fishing industry also took a hit because of dead fish. So what do you do with that? Well, the animals keep dying, Pastor Paul.
I know,
They're
I know.
ranchers. There's a rancher I know, he's a good friend of mine, he's a rancher I know. He lost at least half of his cattle in one night.
In one night?
Just half of them gone in one night, yeah.
What they died from? What they dying from?
I don't know. I don't know. I know he was upset. I know that he was very upset, but he lost about half of his cattle in one night, and he was not happy about that. Cattle are not cheap, so.
Is this why Elon Musk announced today, or a couple days ago? He said, "Look, this is it. Everybody understand." He said, "We must move to Mars to survive." Is he? I mean, I understand that's his objective. He called Bill Gates a knucklehead, and he said, "I'm not going to take any vaccine." Is there something going on here right now? I mean, there's this push for Mars, but it used to be a push to hide under the ground in the underground cities. What's going on, Mike? Do they know the Bible? Do they know what's coming, the apocalypse?
They know the Bible. Yeah, they know that. They also know that some of the stories about Earth are absolutely true. See, they found that out a while ago too. While everybody else debates what the makeup of the Earth is and what existed and what doesn't, they already know. They've already seen it. They've encountered things, right? Recently, I was talking to a group about the woolly mammoth. You know about the woolly mammoth, right?
Yes.
It lived, hundreds of thousands of years ago. Would you be surprised to know that whole families of woolly mammoths are still alive?
Where?
We're talking about a creature with each tusk can weigh up to 800 pounds.
What?
So, when stuff like that happens, and then you find out that other things happen, but then when you realize what the cause is, then it makes sense. The Earth and things in the Earth can somehow be an optical illusion and look like something is flat, desolate, whatever the case may be. But in truth, there are areas of the Earth that humanity has never been yet, and there are things in those areas that probably should be left alone. And but as we travel, as we venture, people pick up diseases, things of that nature, and this year a couple of them were picked up, especially a flesh-eating bacteria. I've heard that story so many times now. It's about 200,000-300,000 years old, but it's a flesh-eating bacteria. It's very old, very resilient. It came right back to life like a tardigrade, and it did damage to a guy, and he had to, had to go through a couple of things. The problem with that is it is now spread, and there's nothing they can do about it because they don't have data on it. And then you have some of the ancient locusts that rise up you have locusts that come out of the ground every 7 years, and then you have a big, giant locust that comes out of the ground every 24 years or something like that. It's one of its cycles. And so they're starting to notice some of these larger locusts in some of the locust swarms that have been seen overseas. Maybe one or two per swarm. And you're talking about a swarm 37 miles long, right? And you see one or two big, ginormous locusts in there. That's not good news, because the big locusts eat meat too. They eat meat. They not only eat green stuff, they eat meat. So
no. What kind of locust?
They're quite like it's a locust with a very long life cycle, right? And they come out, and they are. I think there's about
demonic.
3 times the size as a standard locust, and they're for some reason, probably due to permafrost melts and the magma heating up the inside of the Earth, pushing things up. Things are being pushed out of the Earth, I guess you could say. But they found a couple, and they're going to replicate. So,
Mike, I got one more question. I got another question real fast. Okay, permafrost, polar caps melting. We got you got it. Antarctica. There's some laboratories there. The Germans have been there forever. The Russians, the United States, China. Is there some diseases over there? Do they got some stuff frozen in the ice or is there ancient stuff in the ice that if it melts?
Yes, they keep stuff stuff is in the ice, stuff they can see in the ice that they have not touched and they can't touch. And there's also stuff they take to places like that to put them in the ice, because sometimes they make things you can't kill. Sadly, spiritually, here's what humanity has done. They've been digging around in the ground for a long time, Pastor Paul. They have dug up ancient technology for years now, right? They always find these interesting finds. When they find something like that, they secure that, whatever that find is, but they go and do things with it. And one thing they were bent on doing was making some type of a shell for a human, where a human could last for a long time and would degrade cell-wise. And so naturally they've been involved in mixing this with humanity's DNA and this, that, and the other for a long time. In so doing, they have created abominations of many types. They're categorized as chimeras right now with the White House in America. And they're only allowed to live up to, I believe it's 9 years or something like that, and then they have to be put to death. Until that is, the chimera themselves began to petition, and they said, hey, we're life form too. We want to live beyond those years. Now, we're not talking about some clandestine project. We're talking about what's happening at the White House and the Pentagon, places like that. So those things are on record under chimera. This medical language is still political language, but medical language. And if you can look at it, you'll see. So there are certain people who carry a chimeric trait, and they're allowed to live beyond a certain, their expiration is beyond a certain time. They used to kill them after they were born. They found out they could do it. They did it. So now we have, as I said before, we have chickens with lizard tails and forearms, right? Claws on the forearms. Because they were trying to reconstitute, they actually mixed viable DNA that they had found with the chicken.
You're talking about a chicken with forearms. Wait, with a wing, no wings? You mean chickens with forearms?
No wing, just a wing. Because they were trying to mix what was ancient with what exists now to see where the gaps are in the DNA. Well, just like they collected just about everybody's DNA in the world, right? Everybody should know about that. If you have a relative that submitted their DNA to find out what you are, not only did they submit their DNA, but they submitted their whole family line's DNA. So now they have a catalog of DNA, and they know everybody who has what in them. So now that everybody's cataloged, and it's so funny, I'm gonna say something. It's gonna sound out there, but I'd say 6% of your audience is about to get this. As soon as they finish collecting all the DNA that they needed, the abduction stopped. I'll put it there. They just stopped because they had everything they needed.
Okay. So okay. You're saying that as soon as they got enough DNA that they need, the abductions have stopped. And you are correct about the fact that abductions have stopped. Nobody's talking about it anymore. I mean, they're seeing things now. Everybody's starting to see things. And you've talked about something that I don't want to give away in the... can somebody go get my Aliens, AI, and the Antichrist? Bring the DVDs in here. Mike, you're in. The DVDs just arrived today. I told people earlier, we're shipping these out as fast as we can. Get your order in tonight, folks, if you want it to ship tomorrow. And that's one of them, Brock. There's also the little one. Here's the bigger one. This is the 8. This is Aliens, AI, and the Antichrist. I have it also shrink wrapped so that, people the people in the mail department don't steal them right out of the case. We found that happens. This is the film. So you get 9 DVDs. 9 DVDs for the same price. Okay, you get the 8 speakers. Mike, in this webinar, you said some stuff, because you were free to say it, that is so shocking, I can't get over it yet. So, folks, you want to get that. So did Steve Quayle. Both of you guys both made predictions, which I think the predictions were not the same, but they, I think, mean that are going to collide in these last days. So, Mike, it's the AI, it's the Antichrist. We're in the last days. We're running out of time here tonight. There's so much we could talk. We could talk for 3 hours. Mike, let me ask you. Next Thursday you'll be with us. But can you tell us before you leave tonight, is there a bomb you're going to drop on me again? Are we going to get through this next month? Mike, what's the bomb? What's your final words?
I'm just some of the transportation mechanism, right? Sometimes is often very telling like trains. Very telling. Trains are very telling of future plans. But you know what? In all things, no matter what you see, no matter what you see, no matter what you hear, no matter what happens, right? That could involve a train. Just all of us have to understand that all things are purposed. We may not know why. We don't know why, but all things are purposed.
Are you talking about, Mike, people being transported from location to location by train?
No, not that yet. Not that yet. Because I tell you, to be honest with you, they're not going to have to rustle up anybody and force them to go anywhere. Because people are going to say, hey, get me out of here. That's what they're going to say.
You think they're going to beat the FEMA camp doors down to get in?
Oh, yeah. They're going to get away from the person-on-person wars that will begin to take place in the cities, which will probably begin, I give that a month and a half or something like that before they begin. As I said before, a couple of weeks when I was on, they almost started that night. We're not talking about small scale conflict either. We're talking about large scale, which will effectively tie our hands, right? When no wonder Jerusalem can be trampled underfoot, because America, being her only trusted ally, has a problem, and we can't get to her. For Jerusalem to be tied up for 3.5 years means America is tied up and we can't do anything about it. And people ought to really think about that. See, I have a habit. I'll say one last thing, Pastor Paul. I know people, they normally say, you know, things will happen, maybe it's a 1 out of 1 million chance something will happen. I have a bad habit of thinking backward, right? Like today, I'm very thankful for what did not happen. Every day I wake up, I'm like that. I'm very thankful for what did not happen, because I'm not blind to what should have taken place. Yeah. What is a high probability. We should have been wounded. Something should have happened to us, but it didn't. And I'm very thankful for that. And if more and more people would do that, to be thankful for what did not happen, instead of being frustrated because nothing did happen, I think that they would have a much more stable relationship with faith-wise, with the Lord, and stability for somebody else, because we got to remember, our stability, right, is somebody else's life. Somebody else's life is tied to each and every one of your listeners. They're not here for themselves. God sent them here for somebody else, and it's time for a lot of us to wake up to that factor.
Mike, God bless you. Thank you for the information. Thank you for always being faithful. Want to have you next Thursday night. Let's keep our eyes open and keep looking up, for our redemption's drawing nigh. Thank you, brother.
Amen.